Silence. Ancient ruins, forgotten names, broken oaths, laughter in the midst of tragedy, promises of help that were traps, pride rising like a tower and falling. Who deserves judgment? Only Jerusalem, or all who watched and mocked? Those who profited from its fall, those who promised help but sold betrayal, those who believed themselves untouchable behind their golden walls. Ezekiel didn't speak only to his own people. He raised his voice against the nations, an oracle of fire aimed at all: Ammon, Moab, Edom, Tyre, Egypt. None were clean. None could escape the verdict, because judgment recognizes no borders, no flags, no national gods. Judgment is universal, impartial, relentless. Today we'll read those oracles not as dead history, but as a map of warnings, a catalogue of shared sins, an uncomfortable mirror. Ask yourself, whom do you mock in their fall? Whom have you betrayed for your own gain? What pride shields you while you ignore others? What promises do you make knowing you won't keep them? This is not just an ancient text, it's a code, a judgment written for all peoples, for all generations, for us. Because the real question is not who will be judged, but who will have the courage to hear the verdict before it's too late. It wasn't just Jerusalem. It wasn't just Judah trapped in its maze of betrayals and empty promises. There was a world around it, a board of kings, merchants, and armies, a mosaic of nations bound by trade, distrust, and fear. Ammon, Moab, Edom, Tyre, Egypt. Ancient names, heavy with stories. Ammon and Moab, distant descendants of the same family as Israel. Allies when it suited them, enemies when it was profitable. They secretly celebrated every defeat of Jerusalem. They laughed while it burned. Edom, the treacherous brother, the children of Esau. A blood bond turned into a knife. In Judah's moment of greatest vulnerability, Edom chose to profit from its misfortune, to rob, betray, and hand over those fleeing. Tyre, the jewel of Phoenician trade, a proud city set on the sea. Wealth amassed through ships and treaties. Jerusalem's pain was a business opportunity. While one city fell, the other grew rich, buying and selling without scruples. Egypt, the ancient empire that promised salvation, the dream ally, the guarantor of security. But Egypt only played its own cards. It promised support to draw Judah into its sphere, but abandoned the deal when the price was too high, a savior that never came. This was the stage, an interconnected world. There were no innocents, no clean hands. Jerusalem was not the only one to blame. Its fall wasn't only its own, it was a shared product, the sum of selfish interests, calculated betrayals, and complicit silences. Ezekiel understood this. That's why his message expanded. He no longer only denounced his own people, he pointed the accusing finger outward. At everyone, because corruption and arrogance know no borders, and judgment doesn't either. The prophet, as universal accuser. Ezekiel wasn't a blind patriot. He wasn't a prophet who limited himself to comforting his people or justifying them. He offered no excuses. He didn't soften the guilt. He was an unrelenting prosecutor, an accuser who wouldn't sell out to any flag. First, he laid bare the rot in Jerusalem. He denounced its corruption, its hypocrisy, its institutional violence. His voice didn't tremble when he said, "This judgment is deserved." But he didn't stop there. He didn't allow the comfort of blaming only the enemy. He turned his gaze cold and analytical toward the neighboring nations, and he began to list their crimes, their arrogance, their betrayal, their greed, their indifference. He didn't defend Israel. He didn't defend anyone, because his vision was bigger than nationalism, more unsettling than tribalism. It was a total indictment. Ezekiel saw a map full of borders, but with no innocence. A world interconnected in its crimes, all complicit, each in its own way. Because for him, Judgment wasn't selective. It wasn't partial. It was the inevitable consequence of unleashed human pride. In his voice, God wasn't the God of Judah against its enemies. He was the God who demanded an account from everyone, who accepted no justifications, no alliances, no secret treaties. A God who couldn't be bought with offerings or hollow words. And so, Ezekiel became something rare, something dangerous, not a prophet of national consolation, but a universal accuser, the man who dared to say, judgment isn't for them, it's for everyone, including us, because corruption has no passport, arrogance respects no borders, and true justice doesn't let itself be divided into sides. But to truly understand his message, it's not enough to say he accused everyone. We have to hear his words. We have to decipher his oracles, each directed at a specific people, each with a specific sin, each as a mirror in which, perhaps even today, we can see ourselves reflected. Now let's enter that code into those detailed judgments, one by one, to see not just what they said, but what they still say to us. Analysis of the oracles, the global code. Ammon and Moab, mockery and arrogance. Ammon and Moab, neighbors, distant relatives, children of the same story. But in Judah's moment of collapse, they didn't offer comfort. They offered laughter. Ezekiel accuses them of something simple, but brutal. Rejoicing in another's misfortune. Celebrating someone else's ruin as if it were entertainment. Delighting in the enemy's fire. Because nothing reveals the corruption of the heart more than laughter when someone falls. There is no justice in mockery, only perverse pleasure. But this isn't just an ancient kingdom problem, it's a human reflection. Today we also feed on others' failures. We entertain ourselves with other people's tragedies. We turn a rival's fault into our personal triumph. Ask yourself, whose ruin do we celebrate today? Whom do we point at with scorn while hiding our own cracks? Ammon and Moab embody mockery. But there are deeper sins, more intimate, like the betrayal of someone who trusted you. That is Edom's crime. Edom, the betrayal of the brother. Edom, the brother, descendant of Esau, bound by blood, by history, by destiny. But when Jerusalem burned, Edom didn't help. It profited, it joined the looting, it betrayed those who fled, it closed escape routes. It wasn't the distant enemy, it was the close traitor, the one who knows your weaknesses because they once stood beside you. Ezekiel calls out this wound the betrayal of trust, the price paid for failing to protect the brother. And today, what is different? Betrayals are still alive, political, familial, personal. We become Edom every time we sell out those we swore loyalty to. Whom do we betray to gain something? What pacts do we break when we think no one is watching? Edom shows intimate betrayal, but there's another kind of sin, more sophisticated, more elegant, the pride built on wealth and trade. Tyre's sin. Tyre, commercial pride Tyre, the queen of the sea, the city that ruled trade, proud of its walls, of its fleets, of its gold. For Tyre, Jerusalem's ruin was an opportunity, a new market, another business deal. The fallen walls of one city became stones for its own palaces. Ezekiel doesn't just denounce its arrogance, he denounces its indifference, its cold calculation, its certainty of invulnerability thanks to wealth. Today, are we really any different? What does our success turn into? On whose ruins do we build our towers? Whom do we exploit with our purchases? What injustice do we wash away with a payment? What do we buy with our indifference? Tyre represents the arrogance of commerce, but there's an even older sin, imperial pride, the promise of salvation that is really pure self-interest. Egypt's sin. Egypt, imperial pride, Egypt, the great empire of the Nile, ancient, powerful, cunning. For Judah, Egypt was hope, the promised ally, the dreamed of savior. They signed pacts, they trusted in its strength, they built their plans on its promise. But Egypt didn't come. It didn't defend Judah. It left them alone when Nebuchadnezzar arrived, because Egypt never meant to save them, only to use them, to slow Babylon with someone else's blood. Ezekiel exposes this lie, lays bare the deception of power that promises security but only protects its own interest. Today we also trust in saviors, in powers, in corporations, in leaders who promise help while doing their own calculations. Whom do we believe when they promise us security? To whom do we sell our freedom in exchange for illusory protection? Ammon, Moab, Edom, Tyre, Egypt. They're not just names on an ancient map. They're archetypes, human patterns, universal accusations. They don't exist to blame the past. They exist to force us to look at the present, to ask ourselves what role we play in this story. The map of judgment. It's not just a list of crimes, not a catalogue of enemies to condemn. It's a map of judgment. Ezekiel didn't draw borders to say us versus them. He drew a shared territory of guilt. He showed there were no pure innocents, that every nation had its share in the collective ruin. Ammon and Moab laughed while Jerusalem burned. Edom sold out its brothers for advantage. Tyre profited from others' misfortune. Egypt promised help while planning its own gain. And Judah itself was rotten within, all complicit, all actors in a shared tragedy, all bound by one silent law. You reap what you sow. Ezekiel sketches historical cycles, rise, corruption, fall, repetition, because these stories didn't die with the temple's fire or the dust of razed cities. They've been repeated again and again. Empires that believed themselves eternal, alliances built on betrayal, wealth raised on others' ruins, promises of security that were just elegant lies. Nations accuse each other, justify themselves, dress up as victims while committing their own abuses. But judgment doesn't recognize nationalism. It doesn't see flags. It doesn't accept excuses. Because true justice isn't local, it's global. It doesn't ask where you're from. It asks what you did, whom you destroyed, whom you betrayed, whom you exploited. Judgment isn't a weapon to aim at the enemy. It's a mirror, one that reflects back the uncomfortable image of our shared responsibility. Today, just as then, the warning still holds. Judgment isn't nationalism. It's shared responsibility. The inner judgment. When we hear these oracles, it's easy to see only ancient maps and names. Ammon, Moab, Edom, Tyre, Egypt, the other, the enemy. But Ezekiel didn't write these words just for cartographers or historians. He wrote for those with the courage to see themselves reflected. Each nation isn't just a distant kingdom. It's a human aspect, an archetype. Ammon and Moab are cruel mockery, the pleasure of watching another fall. Edom is the betrayal of the brother, the opportunism that sells trust for advantage. Tyre is greed disguised as success, the proud indifference of commerce that exploits. Egypt is the hollow promise of power, the elegant deception of the self-interested savior. These sins don't live only on the borders of antiquity. They live in us, in our daily decisions, in our alliances and betrayals, in our complicit silences, in our cruel laughter, in our promises we never intend to keep. There is no them, only us. Because judgment doesn't stop at nations. It enters every conscience, knocks on every door, asks every heart. That's why the last part isn't history. It's confession, it's examination, it's a question, it's a mystery that isn't solved with knowledge, but with courage. Existential connection, the mystery today. So ask yourself, which nation are you? In which oracle do you see yourself? Whose fall do you laugh at? Whom do you betray when it's convenient? What pride do you feed while ignoring another's pain? What promises do you make knowing you won't keep them? What trade do you make with your conscience? To whom do you promise security while calculating your own benefit? This judgment wasn't written for Jerusalem alone, nor for Ammon, Moab, Edom, Tyre, or Egypt. It was written for anyone willing to read it honestly, for all peoples, for all generations, for us, because the greatest danger isn't repeating history, it's refusing to recognize it when we're writing it again. Solving the enigma. The justice Ezekiel announced wasn't vengeance. It wasn't an act of divine hatred. It was diagnosis, a cold, precise analysis of the causes of ruin, a map of invisible cracks that become fatal fractures. It wasn't comfort for his own people. It was a warning for everyone. A sign that collapse doesn't begin with foreign armies. It begins with contempt, mockery, betrayal, greed, and lies, with the comfortable indifference dressed up as virtue. Ezekiel didn't teach hatred for the enemy. He taught how to recognize them in the mirror, to see the other as a partner in the shared tragedy, to understand there's no true victory if its price is the neighbor's ruin. His harshest message is also his most necessary. If you want justice, start by not lying to yourself. If you want peace, stop profiting from another's war. If you want redemption, stop betraying those who trust you. Because judgment isn't for them. It's for everyone. For each one. For us. And if these words made you think, if they awoke something uncomfortable but true, then don't ignore them. Because judgment doesn't end when you close this video. Judgment continues in what we choose to do next. If this journey left you reflecting, subscribe to keep exploring these mysteries together. Share this video to open the debate with others. Comment with your interpretation, your doubts, your own questions, because there are no easy answers, only the courage to keep asking. Remember, judgment knows no borders. We all write it every day.